There's something interesting about the people who stay silent on social media. While the rest of the world is shouting, posting, proving, performing, these people remain invisible. Not because they can't post, but because they don't want to. And that silence says more about their psychology than any picture or caption ever could. We live in a time where validation is the currency of self-worth, where people document even the smallest moments just to feel seen. But the ones who choose not to join this endless display, they're built differently. Their minds operate on deeper layers shaped by awareness, emotional maturity, wounds, and sometimes a quiet form of rebellion. Today, we're diving into the psychology of people who don't post on social media, the hidden truth, the dark patterns, the unspoken reasons behind their silence. They are deeply aware of the performative nature of social media, and that awareness shapes almost every choice they make online. When they look at a feed full of selfies, captions, achievements, and carefully crafted moments, they don't see connection, they see performance. They see people constructing identities, polishing realities, and presenting versions of themselves that may exist only in pixels. Where others see a highlight reel, these individuals see an emotional theater. They notice the patterns, people sharing more when they're insecure, posting more when they feel unnoticed, exaggerating when they feel small. And because they understand these psychological motivations so clearly, they choose not to participate in that cycle at all. They don't view posting as harmless self-expression. They see it as a transaction. You give the world a piece of yourself, and in exchange you receive attention, validation, approval, or sometimes criticism. And to them, that deal is not worth it. They refuse to let strangers have emotional power over how they feel about their own life. When someone uploads a picture, they ask themselves, why? For who? What purpose does it serve? And most of the time, they realize the answer is not genuine sharing but social signaling. Look at me, I exist, I'm doing well, I'm relevant. This realization makes posting feel empty, almost artificial. They also see how people measure their self-worth through numbers, likes, followers, comments. These metrics mean nothing to them because they understand how shallow, inconsistent, and emotionally manipulative they are. They've observed how someone's mood rises and falls based on whether a post performs well. They've watched people delete pictures that don't get enough engagement. This behavior, to them, feels like a loss of identity, a surrender of emotional control to algorithms. They choose silence because silence protects them from this kind of psychological dependency. Their awareness also comes from observation. They've seen friends who post excessively while feeling lonely in real life. They've seen people smiling in pictures but crying when the camera is off. They've watched how people curate perfect narratives while struggling privately. And instead of playing along, they step back. They feel disconnected from this constant desire to be seen. They don't need the world's eyes on them to feel real. Instead, they find comfort in not being observed, not being judged, not being compared. This clarity gives them a kind of internal peace. They understand the subtle pressure social media creates, the pressure to look happy, successful, productive, beautiful. They know that once you start posting, you unconsciously start performing. You start asking yourself, is this good enough? Should I share this? Will people like this? And they don't want their life filtered through those questions. They want to live for real experiences, not documented ones. So they choose to remain invisible, not because they're hiding, but because they're free. They don't reject social media out of fear or insecurity, but out of insight. They see the truth behind the curtain. And once you see the performance for what it is, playing the role becomes impossible. They carry unspoken wounds, and these wounds shape the way they interact with the world, especially online. People who don't post on social media often didn't grow up in environments where expressing themselves felt safe. They learned early that being visible attracts criticism, comparisons, or misunderstandings. So they adapted by becoming quiet observers instead of visible participants. Their silence isn't accidental. It's a survival mechanism that has followed them into adulthood. When you look at their empty profiles, what you're really seeing is emotional self-protection, in its most subtle form. These individuals often grew up around judgmental or unpredictable people. Maybe every time they expressed excitement, someone mocked them. Maybe when they shared something personal, it was used against them later. Maybe they were conditioned to believe that showing themselves meant inviting trouble. Over time, they built a shield, not a loud one, but a silent one. A shield made of distance, privacy, and invisibility. And even though that shield protected them years ago, they still carry it today, especially in digital spaces. Social media to them is a place of exposure, a place where people are constantly evaluated, compared, and criticized, even by those who pretend to support them. They see how others get torn apart for their looks, opinions, relationships, or mistakes. They see how one post can become fuel for gossip. And because their past taught them that visibility equals vulnerability, they avoid anything that resembles emotional risk. Their silence on social media is not a lack of confidence, but a fear of being misunderstood all over again. They also carry a deep mistrust of people's intentions, not because they're negative, but because their experiences taught them that people don't always stay kind once given access to your personal life. When someone who has emotional scars thinks about posting, their mind whispers the same old warnings. Don't let them in. Don't give them something to judge. Don't give them something to use against you. These thoughts come from wounds that never fully healed, wounds that still influence their behavior without them even realizing it. Some of these individuals also hide because they don't want to be perceived incorrectly. They fear that a photo, a caption, or a moment taken out of context might define them in ways they can't control. They don't trust the world with their personality, their face, their story. Not because they're ashamed, but because they're protective of the parts of themselves they've never been allowed to show safely. Privacy becomes their emotional armor, the only place where they feel truly safe from judgment. And the truth is, they are tired of proving, explaining, defending, and performing. Silence gives them peace. Invisibility gives them control. Not posting is their way of saying, "You don't get to access me unless I choose it." And choosing silence is a powerful act for someone who once had no control over how others treated them. Their silence is their boundary, their healing, and their quiet rebellion against a world that expects constant exposure. They are acutely aware of how social media distorts reality, and this awareness shapes the way they navigate the online world. People who don't post often see through the illusions that others are captivated by. They understand that what appears online is rarely the full truth, and in many cases, it's not even close to the truth at all. They know that smiles can hide sadness, luxurious lifestyles can be staged, relationships can be toxic behind the scenes, and confidence can be nothing more than filters and captions crafted for validation. This clarity makes them step back, not because they are uninterested, but because they refuse to participate in a world where reality is often replaced with carefully edited highlights. For them, social media isn't just a platform, it's a psychological experiment playing out in real time. They watch how people chase likes, how they attempt to impress strangers, how they craft identities that have little connection to their real selves. They observe the insecurity behind constant posting, the desperation behind attention-seeking behaviors, and the fragile egos hidden beneath bragging. They see how people curate their lives to look flawless, even when everything is falling apart privately. And it's this understanding that makes them reluctant to contribute to the cycle. They don't want to become another character in a digital theater of illusions. These individuals often have a natural ability to read emotions, intentions, and patterns, a skill sharpened by years of watching rather than performing. They notice subtleties others overlook, the forced smile behind a selfie, the tension behind a happy couple photo, the envy disguised as inspiration, the insecurity masked by pride. Their mind breaks down the psychology behind every post, caption, and interaction. They see the hunger for approval, the fear of irrelevance, the silent competition among friends, and the underlying loneliness many try to hide. Once you understand the truth behind the curtain, it becomes difficult to participate in the show. Because they see the deeper layers of human behavior, social media feels shallow to them. It lacks authenticity, depth, and real connection. They crave conversations that reveal the mind, not photos that chase admiration. They value relationships built on trust, not likes. And because they know how easily people's perceptions can be manipulated online, they prefer to keep their real life separate from their digital presence. They believe their life is not entertainment and doesn't need public validation to be meaningful. This awareness also protects them. They avoid the emotional traps that many people fall into, comparing their life to someone else's highlight reel, feeling inadequate because someone seems more successful, or judging themselves based on unrealistic standards. They understand these illusions deeply, so they refuse to let them shape their self-worth. To them, privacy is power, silence is wisdom, and staying unseen is not a weakness, it's a conscious choice made by someone who understands the psychology behind the world too well to be fooled by it. For people who don't post on social media, protecting their inner world becomes a quiet but powerful psychological strategy. In a time where every thought, meal, moment, and emotion is turned into content, choosing privacy is almost an act of rebellion. It is not about being secretive, it is about being selective. They understand that not everything needs an audience. Not every achievement needs applause. And not every emotion needs to be displayed publicly. Their silence is intentional, not accidental. It comes from a deep understanding that once your life becomes public, it is no longer fully yours. Pieces of you start belonging to strangers, and they refuse to let that happen. This desire for privacy doesn't come from fear, but from awareness. They've seen how information gets twisted, judged, or compared. They know how easily people form opinions without context, how quickly assumptions spread, and how the smallest detail can become fuel for gossip or misunderstanding. When people constantly share online, they open not only their highlights but also themselves to the scrutiny of others. Those who choose not to post have learned to protect themselves from this emotional vulnerability. They know that when fewer people know about your life, fewer people can interfere with it, comment on it, or try to influence it. They also value the peace that comes with not being watched. When you're not posting, you're not performing. You're not thinking about angles, filters, captions, or how people will react. You live in the moment instead of documenting it. For them, life is richer when it is experienced fully, not archived for others to consume. They don't want to turn their memories into content, and they don't need digital validation to feel alive. They'd rather feel an emotion deeply than prove it to others. This creates an inner calm, a quietness that people who constantly post rarely experience. Their privacy also helps them maintain emotional freedom. When your life is hidden, nobody knows what to envy, judge, or attack. Nobody knows your plans, your relationships, your goals, or your weaknesses. This invisibility becomes a psychological shield. It protects their mental health by preventing comparisons, avoiding unnecessary drama, and keeping them out of the spotlight. They move through life with a sense of control, deciding who gets access to their world and who doesn't. People who don't post often form stronger real-life connections because their relationships are built on communication, trust, and presence, not on online displays. They share moments intimately with the people who genuinely matter, not with a crowd of strangers or distant acquaintances. This makes their bonds deeper and more authentic. When something good happens, they celebrate privately. When something painful happens, they heal privately. This ability to grow without public pressure shapes them into emotionally grounded individuals. In a world obsessed with being seen, they choose to remain unseen, not because they feel small, but because they understand the power of being known only by those who deserve to know them. Their privacy is not a wall. It is a form of self-respect, a conscious protection of their peace, and a psychological strength that many underestimate. People who choose not to post on social media often do so because they value something most people overlook in today's digital age: authenticity, real emotions, real relationships, real memories. They don't feel the need to prove their happiness, success, or identity through a screen. They understand that social media is a stage where people carefully craft an image of themselves, showing only the brightest angles and the best moments. But they also know that real life isn't always highlight reels. It's full of silence, chaos, confusion, growth, and private victories. By not posting, they choose to live a version of life that isn't filtered, edited, or shaped for an audience. Their sense of identity is internal, not dependent on likes, comments, or external validation. This authenticity comes from deep self-awareness. They have learned, sometimes through pain, that the world does not need access to their inner life to validate its existence. They don't need strangers to affirm their worth or congratulate their achievements. They don't crave attention because they've trained themselves to be emotionally independent. They know that if you rely on others to define who you are, you will constantly be adjusting yourself to fit their expectations. Instead, they want to be true to themselves without being influenced by what trends, algorithms, or digital culture considers acceptable or impressive. Their authenticity also shows in how they connect with others. While many people post online to feel connected, those who stay offline often build deeper, more meaningful relationships. When they talk to someone, it's genuine, not for the sake of creating content. When they laugh, it's not for the camera. When they share a moment, it's because it matters, not because it will get views. They understand that intimacy is not meant to be performed. For them, authenticity means allowing life to be felt privately and intensely, without outsiders watching or evaluating it. This mindset allows them to protect their emotional energy. Every time someone posts online, they open themselves to comparison, envy, judgment, or misunderstanding. But a person who refuses to participate in this cycle preserves their mental space. They avoid the invisible stress that comes from trying to maintain a perfect digital persona. They don't have to worry about whether they appear successful enough, fun enough, beautiful enough, or interesting enough. They live without the pressure of meeting an online standard, and this gives them a sense of freedom that many people quietly crave. Authenticity also means they prioritize real-life experiences over digital impressions. They would rather sit with their feelings than rush to post about them. They'd rather enjoy a moment deeply than interrupt it to take the perfect photo. This makes their emotional world richer and their understanding of themselves stronger. They live with an internal compass instead of an external scoreboard, and because they don't seek validation, their self-worth remains steady, untouched by the fluctuations of online approval. In a world where everyone is trying to be seen, they choose to truly be themselves. That is their psychological strength, a quiet, grounded authenticity that cannot be influenced, measured, or manipulated by the digital world. Their identity belongs to them alone, and that is why they protect it so fiercely. In the end, the people who choose not to post on social media remind us of something we often forget in our rush to be visible, that a meaningful life does not need an audience. Their silence is not emptiness, it is protection. Their privacy is not secrecy, it is self-respect. And their absence from the digital noise is not a lack of confidence, but a quiet declaration that their worth is not up for public measurement. They move differently from the world, not because they are hiding, but because they have learned that the most precious parts of a human life are meant to be lived, not displayed. If anything, their behavior is a mirror for all of us. It forces us to question why we share, why we seek validation, and why we sometimes feel incomplete without digital attention. They teach us that there is strength in being unseen, that healing does not need witnesses, and that growth often happens in the shadows, far from the pressure to perform. Their way of living shows us that it's okay to protect your inner world, to guard your peace, and to choose authenticity over applause. So if you've ever felt out of place in the constant digital spotlight, if you've ever felt the urge to step back, if you've ever valued memories more than metrics, then maybe you already understand them. Maybe you are one of them. And maybe, just maybe, the world needs more people like that. People who choose depth over display, reality over performance, and self-worth over social validation. Because sometimes the quietest people have the loudest truths living inside them.